If you think you know what betrayal feels like, wait until you hear what my boyfriend of 3 years and my best friend since childhood did to me on the night I was planning to tell him I was pregnant. Hey everyone, before I dive into this story that completely changed my life, if you could hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up, it would mean the world to me. Your support helps me share these real stories that so many of us go through. And please, share this with someone who might need to hear it. You never know who might be going through something similar. My name is Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, where the rain matches my mood most days now. 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I had Jake, my boyfriend of 3 years who I met during our senior year at Oregon State University. We moved to Portland together after graduation, got a cozy apartment in the Pearl District, and I honestly believed we were building our forever. Then there was Emma, my best friend since we were 7 years old when her family moved next door to mine in the small town of Bend. We did everything together: sleepovers, high school graduation, college applications, and even moving to Portland around the same time. She was like a sister to me, the person I called when I needed to cry, laugh, or just complain about work at the marketing firm downtown. The three of us were inseparable. Jake loved Emma's sense of humor, and Emma always said Jake was perfect for me. We'd spend weekends hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, trying new breweries in southeast Portland, or just hanging out at our apartment playing board games. Emma would crash on our couch at least twice a week, and Jake never seemed to mind. If anything, he encouraged it, saying how nice it was that I had such a close friend. We had this routine where Emma and I would go to Saturday market downtown every weekend, browsing the local crafts and street food while Jake played basketball with his college buddies. Then we'd all meet up for dinner at some new restaurant we'd found on Yelp. Emma was always the first person I'd text when something good or bad happened at work. Jake was the person I'd curl up with every night, planning our future over episodes of The Office. I remember one evening in particular, about a year into our relationship, when the three of us were walking along the Willamette River waterfront after dinner. The city lights were reflecting on the water, and I felt this overwhelming sense of contentment. I had my boyfriend's hand in mine, and my best friend making us laugh with stories from her job at the nonprofit downtown. I actually said out loud, "I hope we're still doing this when we're 80. And both of them agreed enthusiastically. That memory feels like a knife in my chest now. But looking back now, there were signs I completely missed. Little things that seemed innocent at the time but now make my stomach turn, like how Emma knew Jake's coffee order better than I did, or how she'd always volunteer to pick him up from the airport when he traveled for work because it was on her way, even though it definitely wasn't. It started about 8 months ago. Jake began working late more often, coming home around 9 or 10 p.m. instead of his usual 6:30. When I'd ask about his day, he'd give short answers and immediately jump in the shower. Emma, who used to text me constantly throughout the day, started taking hours to respond. When we hung out, she seemed distracted, always checking her phone. I started noticing other small changes too. Jake, who used to be obsessed with his phone being dead, suddenly always had it on silent. He'd place it face down during dinner, something he'd never done before. Emma started canceling our girls' nights more frequently, always with last-minute work excuses that seemed flimsy. When she did show up, she'd leave earlier than usual, claiming she was tired. There were also these weird moments of awkwardness between them that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Like when we were all watching a movie and Jake would get up to get snacks, Emma would suddenly need to use the bathroom at the same time. Or when we were out at restaurants, they'd both reach for the salt at the same moment and their hands would brush, and they'd both pull back like they'd been burned. The first real red flag came during a group hiking trip to Multnomah Falls in October. We went with a few other friends, and I noticed Jake and Emma walking together ahead of the group, deep in conversation. Their heads were close together, and Emma kept touching his arm as she talked. When I caught up, they quickly changed the subject. Emma laughed a little too loudly and said they were just talking about some Netflix show, but when I asked which one, they gave different answers. Jake looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes for the rest of the hike. Later, when we stopped for photos at the falls, I suggested we take a group selfie. Emma immediately stepped to Jake's other side, putting him between us. In every photo from that day, they're standing close together while I'm slightly apart. I should have trusted my instincts then. A few weeks later, I found a receipt in Jake's jacket pocket for dinner at Le Pigeon, this expensive French restaurant downtown. We hadn't been there together, and when I asked him about it, he said it was a work dinner. But Le Pigeon seemed like an odd choice for a work meeting, and the receipt was for 2 people, not a group. The timestamp showed it was on a Tuesday night when he told me he was working late on a presentation. Around the same time, Emma started mentioning this guy from her gym who she was maybe interested in, but she was always vague about details. She'd bring him up just enough to make it seem like she was dating, but never enough for me to get a clear picture of who he was. When I'd ask to meet him or see a photo, she'd change the subject or say it wasn't serious yet. I also started noticing that Jake and Emma had developed inside jokes I wasn't part of. They'd reference things I didn't understand, exchange looks when certain songs came on the radio, or laugh at comments that didn't seem funny to me. When I'd ask what was so amusing, they'd claim it was something from work or an old memory, but their explanations never quite made sense. The most unsettling change was in our physical intimacy. Jake and I had always been affectionate, holding hands while walking, cuddling on the couch, random kisses while cooking dinner, but he started pulling away from casual touch. He'd move away if I tried to snuggle during movies, claiming he was too hot. He stopped reaching for my hand during walks. Our conversations became surface level, focused on logistics rather than dreams or feelings. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a cold December evening, and Portland was experiencing one of its rare snowfalls. The city looked magical, with a thin layer of white covering the bridges and the pine trees in our neighborhood. I had just gotten some life-changing news that afternoon. I was pregnant. I'd been feeling tired and nauseous for a couple of weeks, but I attributed it to stress from the busy season at work. When I finally took the test, seeing those 2 pink lines sent a wave of emotions through me. Fear, excitement, uncertainty, but mostly love. I imagined Jake's face when I told him how we'd figure it out together, maybe finally talk about getting married. I planned the perfect evening. I bought his favorite Thai takeout from Pok Pok, got a bottle of sparkling cider since I couldn't drink wine anymore, and even bought a little onesie that said "Made in Portland" as a cute way to break the news. I spent an hour setting up our small dining area, arranging the food on our good plates, lighting the candles we usually saved for special occasions. I had this whole speech planned about how scared but excited I was, how I knew we hadn't talked about kids seriously yet, but that I could picture us as parents. I imagined us crying happy tears, talking until late into the night about names and nursery colors and whether we'd need a bigger apartment. I even called my mom earlier that day to tell her the news, and she was so excited about her first grandchild. She made me promise to call her right after I told Jake, and we started talking about when she could visit from Bend to help with baby preparations. The whole day felt like this beautiful bubble of anticipation and joy. Jake was supposed to be home by 7 p.m. I had everything set up, candles lit, food staying warm in the oven, the pregnancy test and onesie wrapped in a small box with a note that said, "Our greatest adventure starts in 8 months." I kept checking the mirror, practicing how I'd smile when I handed him the box, imagining his reaction. 7 p.m. came and went. Then 8 p.m. By 8:30, I was pacing around our apartment, checking my phone constantly. The candles had burned down significantly, and I was getting worried the food would be ruined. I texted him, "Hey babe, just wondering what time you'll be home. Have something special planned." No response. By 9 p.m. I was calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail every time. That sick feeling in my stomach was getting worse, and it wasn't just morning sickness. I started imagining worst-case scenarios, car accidents, medical emergencies, some kind of crisis at work that was keeping him from contacting me. I tried texting Emma to see if she'd heard from him, but she didn't respond either. That should have been my first clue, because Emma always responded to my texts, usually within minutes. But I was too worried about Jake to think clearly about what her silence might mean. Around 10:30 p.m., I decided to drive to his office building to see if his car was still there. The snow was coming down harder now, making the roads treacherous, but I was beyond rational thinking at that point. I just needed to know he was okay. The drive downtown felt endless, my windshield wipers struggling against the heavy snowfall, my mind cycling through every possible explanation for his absence. His car wasn't in the parking lot, which made me even more worried. The office building was dark, except for a few scattered lights from the security company and a law firm that worked late hours. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, calling his phone over and over, each call going straight to voicemail. I drove around the city for another hour, checking places we usually went. Our favorite coffee shop on Burnside, the 24-hour gym in the Lloyd district, even the hospital emergency rooms, because I was convinced something terrible had happened. Emma's apartment building was my last stop. Her car wasn't there either, which was strange because she'd mentioned having a quiet night in when we texted earlier that day. The snow was really coming down now, and I was getting scared to drive. Portland doesn't handle snow well under the best circumstances, and my old Honda was struggling with the slippery streets. I finally decided to head home, praying Jake would be there with some reasonable explanation for his disappearance. By midnight, I was panicked and exhausted. I sat in our apartment, staring at the cold Thai food and melted candles, feeling like I was living in a nightmare. The little wrapped box with the pregnancy test seemed to mock me from the coffee table. This was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of our lives, and instead, I was sitting alone, terrified that something horrible had happened to the father of my unborn child. I called Jake's phone one more time, and this time it rang. My heart jumped with relief until I heard his voice. "Sarah? What's wrong? Why are you calling so late? Jake, where are you? I've been worried sick. You were supposed to be home hours ago." There was a pause, and I could hear music and voices in the background. It sounded like he was at a bar or restaurant. "Oh shit, I'm sorry. I completely forgot. Work ran late, and then some of us went out for drinks. I should have called." Something in his tone felt off. He sounded nervous, maybe even guilty. "Which bar?" "I'll come meet you guys." Another pause. Longer this time. "Actually, we're just wrapping up. I'll be home soon. Don't wait up, okay?" The line went dead. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Emma's apartment complex, snow piling up on my windshield, feeling a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with morning sickness. I drove home and tried to sleep, but I kept checking my phone. Jake didn't come home until almost 3 a.m. I pretended to be asleep when he quietly slipped into bed, smelling like perfume that definitely wasn't mine. The next morning, I woke up feeling sick to my stomach, and not just from pregnancy symptoms. Jake was already in the shower, humming some song I didn't recognize. When he came out, he was rushing around getting ready for work, acting like nothing had happened. I tried to bring up the evening I had planned, but he was distracted, checking his phone while brushing his teeth, grabbing a granola bar instead of sitting down for breakfast like he usually did. "I had something special planned for us last night," I said, gesturing toward the dining room where the cold Thai food containers were still sitting on the table. He barely glanced over. "Oh, sorry, babe. I told you work ran late. Rain check? Rain check on a nice dinner together?" I asked, still hoping to share my news, still wanting to believe his explanation. "Yeah, absolutely. Things are just crazy at work right now. This new client is demanding, and my boss is breathing down everyone's necks. Maybe this weekend?" But his explanation felt hollow. In 3 years together, Jake had never just disappeared for an entire evening without checking in. Even when work was genuinely crazy, he'd send quick texts or call during breaks, and he was acting so casual about it, like my worry had been unreasonable. I watched him grab his keys and head for the door, and something inside me shifted. For the first time in our relationship, I didn't believe him completely. But the weekend came and went with more excuses. Jake was distant, checking his phone constantly, taking calls in the other room. When I'd ask who was calling, he'd say it was work or his college buddy Marcus, but he'd never let me overhear the conversations. He started closing the bathroom door when he showered, something he'd never done before. He'd stay up late on his laptop, claiming he was catching up on work emails, but I never saw any actual work documents on his screen. Emma was equally elusive, canceling our usual Sunday brunch and giving vague reasons why she couldn't hang out. When we did text, her responses were short and impersonal, nothing like our usual long conversations about everything and nothing. She stopped asking about Jake, which was weird because she used to always want to know how things were going with us. The pregnancy was becoming harder to hide. I was 12 weeks along and starting to show, especially first thing in the morning. I had to be careful about how I positioned myself when Jake and I were intimate, which was becoming less frequent anyway. I was also dealing with intense fatigue and nausea, but I couldn't explain my symptoms without revealing the pregnancy. I kept the pregnancy test and onesie in my desk drawer at work, pulling them out sometimes during lunch breaks and imagining different scenarios for telling Jake. But every evening, he'd come home distracted or tired or stressed about work, and the timing never felt right. Part of me was also starting to fear his reaction, which was a new and terrible feeling. The breaking point came 2 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday morning that's burned into my memory forever. I was getting dressed for work when Jake's phone, which he'd left charging in the bathroom, buzzed with a text notification. Jake was in the kitchen making coffee, and normally I would never look at his phone. I trusted him completely, and privacy had never been an issue in our relationship. But something made me glance at the screen. Maybe it was weeks of accumulating doubt, or maybe it was intuition. But when I saw the name on the lock screen, my blood ran cold. Emma had never been saved in his phone with a heart emoji, ever. In 3 years of friendship and dating, she was always just Emma or Emma C. to distinguish her from his coworker Emma. The heart was new, intimate, romantic. My hands shook as I picked up the phone. The preview showed just enough to destroy my world. Can't wait to see you tonight. I love you too. I love you too. Those 4 words confirmed what my subconscious had been trying to tell me for months. The late nights, the secrecy, the distance, the awkwardness between them. It all made horrifying sense now. My boyfriend of 3 years and my best friend of 21 years had been having an affair right under my nose. I screenshot the message and sent it to myself, my fingers moving automatically while my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. Then I heard Jake's footsteps approaching the bathroom, and I quickly put his phone back where I'd found it. "Coffee's ready," he called out cheerfully, like nothing had changed, like he hadn't just shattered my entire world with 4 words on a screen. The rest of that day passed in a blur. I couldn't concentrate at work, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except those words. When Jake came home that evening, I was sitting on our couch with his phone in my hand. "We need to talk," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Jake saw his phone and went pale. He knew immediately that I knew. "Sarah, I can explain." "How long?" I interrupted. He sat down across from me, running his hands through his hair. 3 months. 3 months. While I was planning our future, he was building one with my best friend. "Is it serious?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jake looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen. We tried to stop it, but..." "But what? You love her?" He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. That's when I told him about the pregnancy. I wasn't planning to use it as ammunition, but I was 3 months along now and starting to show. I couldn't hide it much longer anyway. The look on Jake's face when I told him will haunt me forever. Not joy, not even surprise, just pure panic. "Are you sure it's mine?" he asked. That question broke something inside me that I didn't even know could break. Here was the man I'd been faithful to for 3 years, who I'd moved across the state for, who I'd imagined growing old with, questioning whether I'd been unfaithful while he was sleeping with my best friend. I didn't even dignify it with an answer. I just got up, went to our bedroom, and started packing a bag. Jake followed me, apologizing, saying we could work it out, that he'd end things with Emma. But I knew it was too late. The trust was gone, and honestly, so was my love for him. You can't unknow what you know, and you can't unfeel that kind of betrayal. I stayed at a hotel that night, and the next day I called Emma. I needed to hear it from her, too. She cried on the phone, saying she never meant to hurt me, that it just happened, that they tried to fight their feelings but couldn't. She said she loved him and he loved her, and that maybe it was better this way because now we could all be honest. Honest. As if months of lying and sneaking around was somehow a favor to me. The hardest part wasn't losing Jake. As much as it hurt, I realized I'd rather know who he really was than live a lie. The hardest part was losing Emma. She'd been my best friend for over 20 years. She knew my dreams, my fears, my insecurities. She knew how much I loved Jake, and she took him anyway. I moved out of the apartment we shared and found a small 1-bedroom place in the Hawthorne district. The rent was higher than I could comfortably afford on my own, but I needed to start over somewhere that didn't have memories of them everywhere. The pregnancy became both my biggest challenge and my greatest blessing. I was navigating morning sickness, doctor appointments, and emotional upheaval, all while trying to process the betrayal and rebuild my life. But feeling that baby grow inside me gave me purpose and strength I didn't know I had. Jake tried to be involved at first. He'd text asking about doctor appointments and offering to help with expenses, but his heart wasn't in it, and mine wasn't open to him anymore. When my daughter Lily was born 6 months ago, he was there for the birth, but it was awkward and painful for everyone involved. Emma sent flowers to the hospital with a card that said, "Congratulations, Sarah. I hope someday you can forgive me." I threw the flowers away without reading the card twice. Jake and Emma got engaged 3 months after Lily was born. I found out through social media, like everyone else. The photos showed them on a beach in California, Emma wearing the ring I'd imagined on my own finger so many times. What hurt most wasn't that they were together. I'd made peace with that. It was seeing how happy they looked, how natural and right it seemed. It made me question everything about my relationship with Jake. Had he ever loved me the way he loved her? Had I just been a placeholder until he found what he was really looking for? But here's what I've learned in these past 6 months. Betrayal doesn't just take away what you had. It gives you clarity about what you deserve. I deserve someone who chooses me every day, not someone who has to talk himself out of leaving. I deserve friends who protect our friendship, not people who see it as expendable when something better comes along. And most importantly, I deserve to trust my own instincts instead of explaining away red flags. Lily is the most beautiful thing that came out of all this pain. She has Jake's eyes but my stubborn streak, and every day she reminds me that some endings are actually beginnings in disguise. I'm raising her to be strong, to value loyalty, and to never settle for someone who makes her question her worth. I won't lie, there are still hard days. Days when I see couples holding hands and remember what it felt like to believe someone was my person. Days when I miss having a best friend to call with good news or bad news. Days when I wonder if I'll ever trust anyone completely again. But I'm building a new life, one that's entirely mine. I got promoted at work, partly because I throw myself into projects now instead of rushing home to someone who wasn't rushing home to me. I've made new friends, other single moms who understand the challenge of balancing everything alone. I've started hiking again, exploring trails around Oregon with Lily in her carrier, showing her the beauty of the state she was born in. And slowly, I'm learning to trust myself again, to trust that I deserve better than someone who can lie to my face for months, to trust that real love doesn't require you to compete with your best friend, to trust that the right person won't make me wonder if I'm enough. Jake pays child support and sees Lily every other weekend. We're cordial but not friends, and I'm okay with that. Emma and I haven't spoken since that phone call, and I'm okay with that too. Some bridges need to burn completely before you can build better ones. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Now I realize it was just beginning. The real version this time, not the fantasy I'd been living where people who claim to love you actually put that love into action. If you're going through something similar, I want you to know, the betrayal isn't a reflection of your worth. Their choices are about who they are, not who you are. You deserve people in your life who choose you consistently, who protect your heart instead of breaking it, who see loving you as a privilege, not a burden. And to anyone watching who might be the Emma or Jake in someone else's story, please just be honest. Break up first. End the friendship first. Don't leave someone you claim to care about to discover your betrayal in text messages and changed behavior. The temporary discomfort of an honest conversation is nothing compared to the lasting damage of deception. Before I sign off, I want to ask for your support once more. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in this kind of pain. Your engagement helps me reach more people with these real stories that so many of us experience but don't always talk about. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for holding space for my pain and my healing. And thank you for reminding me that even in our loneliest moments, we're never truly alone. Take care of yourselves, and remember, You deserve love that doesn't come with question marks.